At the October 2024 BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, Vladimir Putin walked onto the stage holding a banknote. Not a ruble, not a yuan, a prototype. A new BRICS currency ringed with the national flags of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, printed with text in 5 languages. It was symbolic, not yet legal tender, but the message was deliberate, and the 34 heads of state watching understood it clearly. The world's largest economies outside the West had gathered on Russian soil to discuss one thing above all else: how to dismantle 50 years of American financial dominance, how to kill the petrodollar, and how to build something in its place. This is the financial historian, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. The dollar didn't become the world's reserve currency by accident. It was engineered, deal by deal, crisis by crisis, through military power, strategic agreements, and a financial architecture so deeply embedded in global trade that most countries couldn't survive without it. Now, for the first time in half a century, a bloc representing 48.5% of the world's population and 39% of global GDP is building the exit ramp. To understand why this moment matters, you need to understand how the dollar's dominance was built. Go back to August 15, 1971. Nixon closes the gold window. The dollar becomes fiat, unmoored. Suddenly, there's nothing backing it except the word of the American government, and confidence wavers. So the Nixon administration needed a new anchor fast, something the entire world needed, something they'd always need. They found it in oil. In 1974, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger arrived in Riyadh. The United States and Saudi Arabia signed the Joint Commission for Economic Cooperation. The arrangement was elegant in its simplicity. Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter, would continue pricing its oil in dollars. In exchange, the United States would provide military protection and weapon sales to the kingdom. Saudi oil revenues, called petrodollars, would be reinvested into U.S. Treasury bonds, recycled back into American debt markets, and used to finance Washington's deficits. By 1975, every OPEC nation had aligned with this arrangement. The effect was immediate and total. Any country that needed oil, which meant every country on earth, first needed dollars. Not gold, not pounds, not marks, dollars. To buy energy, you bought dollars. To hold energy security, you stockpiled dollars. Every central bank on earth became a dollar customer. Every international trade invoice denominated in dollars fed perpetual demand for American currency. This was the exorbitant privilege French Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing described bitterly in 1965. The United States could print the world's reserve currency, export its inflation, run enormous deficits, and force everyone else to absorb the consequences. For 50 years, no country was powerful enough to challenge it. That calculation changed in 2001. When Jim O'Neill, an economist at Goldman Sachs, coined the term BRIC in a research note, he was describing 4 fast-growing economies that would reshape the 21st century. Brazil, Russia, India, and China. 4 countries with massive populations, abundant resources, and accelerating growth. What O'Neill described as an investment thesis, those 4 countries turned into a geopolitical project. In 2006, the original BRIC nations held their first foreign ministers' meeting. In 2009, they held their first formal summit. In 2010, South Africa joined, completing the BRICS acronym. But the real catalyst wasn't economics, it was sanctions. In 2014, after Russia's annexation of Crimea, the United States threatened to cut Russia off from SWIFT, the global financial messaging network that processes trillions of dollars in transactions daily. Russia immediately began building its own alternative, the System for Transfer of Financial Messages, or SPFS. Then in February 2022, following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the United States and its allies froze $300 billion in Russian central bank assets and expelled Russian banks from SWIFT. In a single weekend, the most powerful financial weapon in history was deployed against a nuclear state. The message ricocheted around the world. Not just in Moscow, in Beijing, in Delhi, in Riyadh, in Brasilia. Every government watching understood the implication. If you hold your reserves in dollars, if your trade flows through SWIFT, if your financial system is integrated into the American-led order, Washington can freeze your economy with a phone call. The dollar wasn't just a currency anymore. It was leverage. And suddenly, every nation that had ever had a tense relationship with Washington reconsidered its exposure. Within months of the Russia sanctions, BRICS membership applications exploded. At the 2023 summit in Johannesburg, 6 nations were invited to join: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Argentina. By January 2024, 4 of them, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE, had formally joined. Argentina declined after newly elected President Javier Milei reversed course. In January 2025, Indonesia became the 10th full member. At the 2024 Kazan summit, 13 nations signed on as partner countries: Algeria, Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Thailand, Turkey, Uganda, Vietnam, and Uzbekistan. Nearly 20 additional countries have applied for membership or expressed interest. The bloc now controls staggering concentrations of strategic resources. BRICS nations collectively account for 72% of global rare earth mineral reserves, 36% of global natural gas production, 78% of global coal production, and through Saudi Arabia and the UAE's participation, significant leverage over global oil flows. This isn't just an economic bloc. It's a resource cartel with nuclear weapons, the world's largest populations, and deep resentment of a financial system designed to benefit one country above all others. And they're building the infrastructure to exit that system. At the Kazan summit, BRICS formally advanced the BRICS Pay initiative, a decentralized payment messaging system designed to facilitate trade in local currencies, bypassing SWIFT entirely. China's cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, already provides an alternative settlement pathway. As of January 2025, CIPS has 1,467 indirect participants across 119 countries, linking 4,800 banks in 185 nations. Still smaller than SWIFT, but growing. China and Russia now conduct the vast majority of their bilateral trade in yuan and rubles, bypassing the dollar entirely. Trade between China and Russia reached a record $244.8 billion in 2024. Brazil and China signed a yuan real trade settlement agreement in 2023. India has begun purchasing Russian oil in rupees. Nearly half of all intra-BRICS trade is now settled outside the dollar. What was unthinkable a decade ago is becoming routine. Central banks are also quietly voting with their gold. In 2024, central banks worldwide added 1,045 metric tons to global gold reserves, the third consecutive year that annual purchases exceeded 1,000 metric tons. This isn't coincidence. It's strategic hedging, moving reserves away from dollar-denominated assets and into something that can't be frozen by executive order. By 2024, BRICS nations collectively held 6,143 tons of gold compared to the United States' 8,134 tons. The gap is narrowing. And while gold doesn't pay interest, it also can't be sanctioned. The dollar isn't blind to the threat. The dollar index, which measures the dollar's performance against a basket of currencies, fell by roughly 8% in 2025. The IMF's own data shows the dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has declined from 72% in 2000 to approximately 58% by the end of 2024. Still dominant, but the trajectory is clear. Washington has noticed. In December 2024, President Trump posted a direct warning on Truth Social. He threatened 100% tariffs on any BRICS nation that creates a new currency or backs any alternative to the dollar. The threat was real. After Trump's warning, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who had supported creating a common BRICS currency, quietly dropped the idea from Brazil's 2025 BRICS presidency agenda. The threat of a 100% tariff has a way of concentrating minds, but Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov dismissed the pressure. More and more countries are switching to national currencies in their trade, he said. If the U.S. uses economic force to compel countries to use the dollar, it will only strengthen the trend of switching to national currencies. He wasn't wrong. Every American threat accelerates the motivation for the exit. Every sanction demonstrates the risk of dependency. Every tariff threat proves that the dollar system is an instrument of coercion, not just commerce. Here's the paradox that makes this transition so dangerous. And the dollar's dominance isn't based on quality anymore. The United States holds $38 trillion in national debt. It runs persistent trade deficits. Its manufacturing base has eroded for decades. The dollar retains its reserve status largely because of institutional inertia, because global trade contracts are written in dollars, because oil is priced in dollars, because U.S. Treasury markets remain the deepest, most liquid, safe asset in existence. These aren't natural advantages, they're path dependencies. And path dependencies can be broken. But they break slowly, not overnight, not with a single summit and a symbolic banknote. The euro was built over years of legal and institutional architecture. The BRICS bloc lacks that depth. Its members have vastly different inflation regimes, political systems, and economic interests. How China and Russia favor a more coordinated bloc. India and Brazil prefer looser arrangements that don't risk their Western relationships. A true BRICS currency faces the same challenge every currency union faces. Who controls monetary policy? Whose interests dominate when they conflict? The euro took decades to build and nearly collapsed in 2010. BRICS doesn't have that level of institutional trust yet, and the unit, the proposed BRICS currency concept backed by a basket of member currencies and partially anchored to gold, remains a proposal. Discussed, promoted, symbolically printed, but not yet operational, not yet legal tender. The technical and political barriers are enormous. But here's what history tells us about reserve currencies. They don't die in a day. They erode across decades. The British pound held 64% of global reserves in 1948. By 1969, the dollar had surpassed it. By 1980, the pound held just 2%. The entire transition took roughly 30 years. And it happened not because Britain was defeated militarily, but because the economic center of gravity shifted. Because the debts of 2 world wars hollowed out the British financial system. Because a more dynamic, resource-rich power offered better terms. That transition is happening again. Not on the same timeline, not with the same actors, but with the same underlying logic. Economic power is shifting. The unipolar moment of the 1990s is fading. And the countries that resent 50 years of exorbitant American privilege are building the architecture to exit it. The dollar will not collapse tomorrow. It will not be replaced next year. The U.S. A new financial system remains the deepest, most trusted, most liquid in the world. Its legal frameworks, its contract enforcement, its capital markets. These aren't replicated easily. The renminbi represents only 5% of global reserves today. That doesn't change overnight, but 58% is not 72%, and 72% was not 85%. Each percentage point lost represents trillions in reduced demand for American dollars, reduced demand for American debt, reduced ability for Washington to export its inflation, run its deficits, and fund its military on the world's credit card. The Kazan summit of October 2024 didn't end the dollar. But Vladimir Putin holding that prototype banknote on a stage flanked by the leaders of nations representing half the world's population wasn't theater. It was a declaration. That the financial architecture of the post-war world is being renegotiated. And this time, the countries that weren't invited to Bretton Woods in 1944 intend to have a seat at the table. The age of the dollar as the unchallenged master of the global financial system may not be ending, but for the first time in 50 years, it is genuinely being questioned. And in finance, as in history, the moment something can be questioned is the moment it begins to change. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.